is fake news, is disinformation destroying our democracy? And we have a wonderful panel today. It will be moderated by Marcella Carrillo-Pattinson. She is a wonderful colleague and partner to the Center for Civic Engagement, and she is the director of Undocumented Initiatives. She does really tremendous work at the college and brings a wonderful perspective to this panel. Before we do get started, I know there's something on many of your minds, and that is we have this service hour tracked, and the answer is simple. You will receive an email after this. What you needed to do was register. You needed to register for this event in GivePulse. You'll receive an email in your email account that you registered with for GivePulse. You'll need to click on that email and submit your impact, and then we will verify that based on the participants list that we have from the event today. Those of you who are joining from our Greek community, the Center for Fraternity and Sorority Life here on campus has asked that you respond only respectfully, and those who don't meet the standards of decorum that your organizations adhere to may face disciplinary action and may not receive credit for this. So without any more, Marcella, I hope you are here and can hear and see us. I will turn the time over to you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, I'm not gonna put my picture because I'm having some technical problems, but we're gonna start this. I'm very excited and I want to welcome everyone. As David was saying, my name is Marcella Pattinson and I lead all the undocumented initiatives system-wide. We're gonna start with our land of knowledge, and I think it's very important to start then with this. So, okay, wait a minute, 1 second. WSU Pullman is located on the ancestral homelands of the Palouse people and is the ceded lands of the Mimipu Nez Perce tribe. Washington State University's acknowledgements that it's located statewide are on the homelands of the Native people who have lived in this region from the time immemorial. Currently, there are 43 tribes, 36 of which are federally recognized, that share traditional homelands and waterways in what is now Washington State. Some of these are confederacies that represent multiple tribes and bands. The university expresses the deepest respect for gratitude to these original caretakers of the region. As an academic community, we acknowledge our acknowledgement is our responsibility to establish and maintain relationships with these tribes and Native people in support of tribal sovereignty and inclusion of their voices in teaching, research, and programming. So it's very important now to, with this, is start the introduction of a panelist. So now we're gonna have, our first one is gonna be Michael Caulfield. Michael Caulfield is the director of a blended and networking.
Actually, Marcella?
Yes?
Could we start with Reese first?
Oh, okay, okay. Okay, wait a second, Reese. Okay, Reese is a senior at Washington State University majoring in political science. He's a chair of ASWSU's Issues and Forums Committee, and ASWSU committee chartered to facilitate productive and meaningful conversation about global, national, and campus issues. Very involved in the WSU community and active politically, Reese has worked to ensure his fellow students are informed, about and engaged in civic life. In addition to the many events, issues, and forums puts on, RIS has helped put together a YouTube videos and another social media to inform students in Washington state ballot initiatives and take part in events such as SWSU Forum on You and COVID-19. So now you want me to continue with Dr. Caulfield now? So now we have Dr. Caulfield says, Mike's first foray into civic digital literacy was over a decade ago, when he first led an effort to define and assess such literacies at Keene State College. Since that time, his work citizen fact-checking has gained national and international recognition with his online media literacy method called Sift, being adopted by many institutions in the United States and in Canada. His work has been covered by numerous publications, including the Washington Post, the Chronicle of Higher Education, and the MIT. Okay, wait, sorry about that. I apologize, my computer was frozen. MIT Technology Review. His focus has been using boundary rationality models to improve our approaches to civic information, online media literacy, and the application of civic attention. Now we have Lorena English, is the social science and government information librarian at Washington State University Pullman. She has been with WSU since 2000 and is specialized in political science, criminal justice, sociology, and law. Her interests and teaching extend to a wide range of academic topics and issues. Her professional interests include note-taking and web annotation, lifelong learning and information literacy, pleasure reading on college campuses, scholarly communication and social science, and academic use of line and productivity tools. This is a great panelist group that we have today, and I'm very excited to hear the discussion. Thanks for your patience.
Okay, I think I was going to go ahead and start us off then. So thank you for the great introduction, Marcella. And I wanted to talk to you guys today for a while as a student over a handful of kind of general topic areas, 3 exactly. And I'm gonna kind of be hitting broad strokes. So I hope I'm not stepping on the toes of any of the other panelists that follow. But I really want to talk about how you as an individual and how I do as well consume information more effectively and more like concertedly, and also how to use like best practices for using social media, and then finally kind of what to do when a friend or a family member has kind of fallen prey to misinformation or one of the many conspiracy theories that are out there now today. And so those are kind of the few topic areas I'm hoping to hit on. So first, I kind of want to talk about like best practices for consuming information and media and the news. And I always say one of the first steps in doing that, when you come across a news article, whether it be browsing the internet or on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, a very good first step is also to always to verify the source it comes from. You know, ask yourself and look into, is this author credible? Do I trust them? Do they hold, at least I think, do they hold appropriate knowledge on what the issue being discussed in the article is, and do they have experience in that area? You know, if it's someone speaking on vaccines, are they an immunobiologist, or are they just some Joe Schmo from around the corner? I think these are very, very important things to ask. Another thing to always look for in a source is to verify bias in the source. Is this source trying to push a certain perspective? And one tool I always use for that, and I will post in the chat here. I'm not entirely sure if everyone participating can see what I post in the chat as a panelist, but this is a link to a media bias chart, which I use frequently to see, the source I'm looking at, whether it has a slant one way or the other, or if it is kind of in an area of non-bias and also reputable fact reporting news. So then once you've kind of looked at your source, a step to go past that is to actually read the article. Look past the headlines. Headlines are always meant to be fetching, and they often don't tell the whole story of what's contained in the article. So it's really good to then go beyond that headline, read the story, and even more importantly, read the story with a critical eye. Ask yourself frequently: is the information being expressed in the story accurate? Is it objective? Does it frame the story in a holistic way? And if it's talking about an issue, does it provide solutions to that issue, or is it just kind of complaining and at the end of the day saying nothing? So I think that's another really good thing to look at. And maybe once you've looked in the source, you've read a news story, it's really good then to see if that story is corroborated in other sources and even larger media outlets. It's good to do this because it's good to know that you're not just getting false information from one source. It could be any random person somewhere trying to feed you a lie. It's good to check and see if that story is backed up in other sources, other reputable sources. And it's also a good thing to remember, if a story is true or really holds some or is verifiable, it's likely something that will get picked up by larger media outlets, because at the end of the day, they're also trying to get your attention, make money. They want to break stories too. So it's often good to verify what you're reading with more than one source. And then finally, a thing I found to be super helpful in how I consume information is look more to your local news outlets, not just national news like CNN or Fox News or ABC News. Your local news is much more focused on fact reporting and not spinning stories, and also local news where you live. It's very pertinent to your daily life, your daily experience. So I think that's definitely crucial. So a second point I want to move on to then is best social media usage practices, because today so many people are getting their news from social media sites, and a lot of the times it's not it's definitely not the best sources. I have something here that more than 50% of Americans report getting some or all of their news on social media. That was a survey from the Pew Research Center in 2019. And I thought that was pretty astounding. So I think that social media is a great boon. It gives us access to a great wealth of information, and usually for free. But I've also had to ask myself, are there some downsides to social media? We've seen with how so many people have fallen to misinformation, kind of spun on social media, that yeah, there are definitely some downsides to social media. So I would say definitely all of the practices that I just talked about beforehand apply to when you see like a news headline or an article on social media, but again, still implementing those practices when you see something on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. I think it's also really important to understand the overall structure of social media sites. And it's important to realize these sites are free, and that allows access to a ton of people, but the sites aren't entirely free, because they still make money somehow, and they make money by running ads on their websites. And in order to make more money from running ads and to keep you on that site longer, so you see more ads and they can sell more ad space, often content trends to be then more extreme, more inflammatory, more entertaining, whatever can get you to click on that next link or keep scrolling or whatever. So then you view as well more ads. So I think that seeing social media in this way, it allows for one to view it a bit more dispassionately and makes it way easier to take some time off from being on social media all day. I know that's definitely really helped me. And one other thing that has definitely helped my 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 consumption of information on social media is to just set time limits for apps. I know that sounds kind of like dumb or lame, but at the end of the day, I set like a half an hour limit for Twitter, and when my time is up, it takes a lot of determination and willpower to just be done at that point. But if you just set it aside and stop scrolling, um, it feels quite a bit better because then rather than being constantly bombarded with information. So that brings me to my last point then, which is what to do when you have like a friend or a family member that has totally fallen for a fake headline or they're wrapped up in a conspiracy. Like, how do you approach this person? How do you talk to them? How do you address their conspiracy theory or whatever? And I've definitely experienced this. I think a lot of people my age have, and definitely not even only my age. I've experienced this in my own family and my friend group. And I used to think with how I consume media and how I thought I had a pretty good grasp on media consumption and news consumption that I would try to debate with them and shoot their conspiracy theories or ideas down with the facts because I obviously had all the facts, which certainly wasn't true. But that is super ineffective. It just causes people to further entrench themselves once they see your facts counter to their facts. So yeah, just slamming people with a ton of counter information, or even worse, calling them out for being plain wrong, just entrenches people into their set beliefs further. It causes people to double down. So a good thing to do instead is to, well, first of all, don't try and pile on facts, but instead appeal to your personal relationship with that person. Appeal to a sense of trust. If they're your family member or a really close friend, you just say, hey, mom or dad or friend or whatever, you can trust me that I wouldn't want to deceive you in this way. And then another really good way to address this is just ask them open questions about what their theories or beliefs, and not in a malicious or or like mean way, but just to essentially create some cognitive dissonance in their own mind, which means like some reasonable doubt in their beliefs. So ask them things like, are there things you don't like about their favorite public leader or celebrity, or how would you address the bigger issue in question? Things like that are really good to get people thinking about their own beliefs and maybe thinking about some holes in their own beliefs. There's a very good New York Times article about this, which I'm also going to post a link to in the chat. I think it's a really great article. And then finally, I think one of the best things you can do for yourself and others is to always verify information when it already supports your beliefs, because otherwise you can fall victim to creating an echo chamber where you're doing that same thing to yourself, where you're just further entrenching your own beliefs, unable to see other perspectives. I think these things they're really difficult to do, and I think they take a lot of practice. And I'm definitely not perfect at all or any of these things either. But I have found that making a concerted effort to improve how I consume information and improve my interactions with people who have fallen prey to misinformation, I vastly improved my own understanding of current issues and also expanded my beliefs outside of my own previous bubble and also outside of my own previous social media timeline, and kind of expanded past that. So uh, I'm going to end it there. I was going to say really quickly, uh, Issues and Forms Committee was mentioned in the little introduction that was given for me. So if you guys like what you heard today from me, or if you are interested in our committee, which some of our goals were outlined earlier in my introduction, I am posting a handful of links in the chat. Those are to our socials, our YouTube. I just made a video with my committee members the other day on this topic, misinformation, how to address it. And then lastly, my email. I am the chair of Issues and Forums Committee. So if you are interested in coming to a meeting or joining, just shoot me an email and I will send you all the information. And yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. And thank you to my other panelists and Dave as well for having me. So yeah.
Thanks so much, Reese. And that's all really, really good advice for people looking to either increase the quality of what they're consuming or help other people that may have fallen down some of these rabbit holes. What I thought I might do actually is maybe zoom a bit out and talk a little bit about the uniqueness of our particular point in time, what's unique about it and what's not. And one way that I've done that in the past, we'll see if this works today. One way I've done that in the past is told this little, I call kind of pretentiously the parable of the lake, but whatever, a little story, right? A little story to demonstrate kind of where we are at this particular moment. And what I ask people to imagine is that they're walking along, right? They're walking along a lake, and it's a nice day. You're jogging, whatever, and in the lake you see a bottle, right? Bottle floating in the lake, and in that bottle, right? In that bottle, there is some sort of note. And so you run out into the lake and you grab that bottle, or maybe the lake sort of washes it up on shore and you get the bottle and you open up the bottle and you take out the note. And, inside the bottle is a note, and it says, let's get a bigger pen here. Inside the bottle is a note. And what it says is, it looks like, it's rather well laid out. It says N95 masks don't work. And it kind of looks like a journal article even, right? It's sort of, it's got some stats here, right? And it's really well cited, lots of footnotes, has some data, table, that sort of thing. And yeah, you pulled it out of the lake, but you're no dummy. You kind of do what we've told you to do since like 4th grade. You think, well, I'm going to use my own super smart brain and I'm going to dissect this, right? And so I'm going to look, and does this person here, this person has an NMD, that sounds like they have some credential. The tone looks very good. We have some footnotes here, lots of data, right? We love data. So I see lots of data. And then the logical argument of it is actually pretty simple, but the logical argument of this note that you pulled out of the bottle is that the gap in a weave of an N95 mask, it's 3 microns, right? And the size of coronavirus, right, is 1.4 microns, right? And so the idea is, if you think about that gap and you think about coronavirus, the idea is that coronavirus is going to flow through that N95 mask like a marble through a chain link fence. So you go and you run over and you talk to your friend, and you say, hey, listen, very important information. N95 masks don't work. Friend's very concerned. Says, how do you know this? And you say, well, I found a bottle, floating in a lake. Inside was a note. I open up the note, and the friend looks a little suspicious of this. And you say, well, but I did all the work. I checked. I made sure it was scholarly in tone. I checked the footnotes. Lots of data. I followed the argument. I looked at the logic, and the logic is pretty unassailable. It's like a marble through a chain. I think the friend would be pretty. I think a normal reaction of the friend would be, you did all of this stuff, right? You applied a lot of your attention. You put a lot of work into this. That's clear. It's clear that you care. But you didn't ask the most important questions first. The first question is, who put this note in the bottle? And why should we listen to this person in particular? Right? Are they in a position to know? Do they have a history of being careful with the truth? The second question is, if you really want to know about N95 masks, would your first choice, if I was to ask you, what's your first choice for learning about the efficacy of N95 masks? Would your first choice be like, oh, well, I'm definitely going to get the information from the bottle in the lake? And no, of course it wouldn't. You would choose something better than that. Now, my point is, this is kind of the environment that we've somehow ended into. If you think about it, you know, this lake, it's the web, right? In your platform or the waves or however you want to extend the metaphor, you know, that's Facebook or that's Twitter or that's TikTok. Soon it'll be Clubhouse, you know, whatever the platform is, and it sort of washes up information in front of us, and then we do what we've been trained to do in school, which is we engage deeply with whatever is put in front of us. And we think that somehow, if we engage deeply enough with the notes that we pull out of the bottle, that we'll end up more informed. But it's kind of a fool's mission, right? Because really what you want to do is you want to find better information. You don't want to start here. I mean, I won't go into the details. I kind of opened this N95 masks don't work thing. I won't go into the details of all the things you don't know that don't show up in that. But I mean, like, you probably don't know that N95 masks have an electrostatic charge, right? That tends to pull molecules closer to the weave. You probably don't know that anything that is less than anything that's less than 3 microns actually engages in something called Brownian motion, which is this incredibly complex motion of particles where the particle just zigzags all around. It's actually easier to catch a smaller particle if it's sub 3 microns. It's actually easier because it zigzags all over the place in this unpredictable way. It's something that even physicists had a hard time defining and predicting, right? You probably don't know that the coronavirus usually it travels in a medium, right? Coronavirus doesn't just hang out there. It's in a medium. It's in water vapor. It's in some sort of liquid molecule. And this, of course, makes it easier to get to catch through the internet. You don't know any of that. You're not smart enough, really. You think you are, right? But you're not really smart enough to look at the N95 mask thing and sort of think through it with your own smart brain. So what we have been trying to show students and teachers is different ways of thinking about this. You definitely want, so there is a point where you have your critical process, where you look at something and you look at it deeply. But the first question is this worth my attention, right? Right? Like, is this even worth spending my time on, or should I spend time somewhere else? Should I choose another expert? Should I choose another source? Right? And we haven't really made a concerted effort to teach students that process, that very quick sifting process that has to occur before you actually deeply engage with something. So I've developed a process called Sift. And the idea of Sift is pretty simple. First is just stop and ask yourself, hey, do I have a domain knowledge in this area? Do I recognize the source, right? Do I know enough about this to say, really invest my time? If it's from something you recognize on a topic that you're half knowledgeable about, maybe you just go ahead, start your process of reading. But a lot of times the answer to that is no. The second thing is investigate the source. And when we're talking about investigating the source, and I'll show this really quickly in a minute, we're not talking about Pulitzer Prize winning level investigations. Just, hey, is the source what we think it is? If we think that, hey, this is from a well-known scientist, is it actually from a well-known scientist, or is it from a comedy Twitter account? That level of thing, right? And then find better coverage. If the source is not really what you want out of a source, throw the bottle back. Right? You don't have to engage with the first story. If you're interested in an issue, that's great. You don't have to engage with the first story on that issue that comes to you, right? You can go and you can get a better story, right? You're not stuck. It's not a deserted island. You have the internet. You don't have to sit there with that bottle and that note. Go get something better, right? Find better coverage. And then sometimes we are stuck with what's in front of us. And so we got to do a little more work on it. So the final thing is trace claims, quotes in media to the original context. And part of this is just maybe you click through and read the story, right? Someone says, hey, this story says X. Just go and look at that story. Does that story say X? But it's also when someone feeds you a video that just makes you really upset, ask yourself, is there a longer version of this video so I can see what's happening before this, what's happening after this? When someone gives you a quote and you're like, wow, I can't believe that person said, can we see what they said before or who they were saying it to or when they were saying it? Right? What's the original context, you know, and how does that play? Let me just show you how quick we're talking here, because the idea here is like 30 seconds, 15 seconds of just doing basic due diligence. So let me show you. Let's see. Let's find. Where'd my example go? Oh, here. This is one that I kind of like. You know. In this scenario, let's say that you're a person who has a friend who's trying to go meatless, right? And you find this plant-based meat ingredient guide, and you're excited because your friend also wants to go meatless, but they're a little worried about preservatives. They're worried about being healthy, and you think, I'm going to send this to my friend. This is great because look at what this guide does. I can take any product here, right? Any meatless product, and I can see all the stuff in it. In potential issues, right? Potential issues with that stuff, right? So these fake chicken nuggets have methyl cellulose in it. That doesn't sound so good. And holy crap, look at this. Colorectal cancer? Like I'm trying to go meatless and I'm gonna end up getting colon cancer from some weird, like, okay, my friend probably wants to know this so they can go meatless but be safe, right? But who put this out? Like this, you're pulling the note out of the bottle and you're like, oh, I definitely have to, you don't even know who wrote it. In this case, what we're talking about when we say, you know, do a short, investigate the source, you probably can't see on your screen here. I'm just going up to the location bar. I'm gonna just type Wikipedia up here. We're just gonna do a search and bring up the Wikipedia page associated with this. This is the group behind it. What is this group that put this out? Again, perhaps not visible on your screen due to resolution, but if you look over here on the Wikipedia page, it's a lobbying group. It's a lobbying group. It's by this guy here, Richard Berman, who represents, guess what? Things like the tobacco industry, things like the alcohol industry, and things like the meat industry. So you're looking at a guide to going healthy while going meatless that's produced by a meat industry lobbyist, right? It's pretty clear that's not your best source, right? So that's investigate the source. If you go, the second thing is find better coverage. And again, I'm not saying that you have to find the best coverage, but if we look and we pull out an example like, well, let's say this, someone forwards you this. If you can't see this, this is a receipt from Kroger, and right here it says BLM charge, right? And the idea is, you know, wow, Kroger is collecting charges to give to Black Lives Matter. And you got to tell the people at Kroger supermarket, don't give the money to Black Lives Matter if you don't want that to happen, right? Well, is that true, right? Well, in this case, you know, if you got it from a source that you don't trust, just see what other people have said, about it. And it's really as simple in this case as saying BLM, Kroger, charge. So again, find better coverage on this. And what do we see almost immediately? Up here, we see multiple fact checks. We see fact checks from USA Today, from AP News, from local news stations, from Reuters, right? And we tell students if they're multiple, you can choose which fact checker you like, right? But you probably don't see like a full page of fact checks on something, all of which say it's false if it's not false. More importantly, if you're interested in that, a good fact checker doesn't just tell you true or false. You don't have to trust them because a good fact checker actually will give you the information that they use to make their decision. And in fact, in this case, they'll even show you the original receipt, the image that was altered, right? The final thing that we talk about is this trace. In trace, it can be really simple. In this case here, let's pull up. Let's do let's do this, ditch the sunscreen. This is just a common example of things that happen on the web. Someone will say, hey, it might be time to ditch the sunscreen. And you look here and there's this FDA warns chemicals in your sunscreen entering your bloodstream, like panic, panic, panic. Okay, well, should you panic, right? Again, following Reese's point, you want to at least maybe click through and read the article, right? What you might want to do even more is a lot of bad information is parasitic on good information. And so if you actually look and you find the original reporting source, very often it'll be quite a good source. And when you look at the original reporting source, does it say, stop using sunscreen, you're gonna die? No. It says, oh, sorry. It says absolutely not. So we have the autoplay advertisements. I forgot about that. But what you see when you look at it is it says absolutely not. Do not stop using sunscreen. We actually know that skin cancer is a risk. That's a known risk. This other stuff is concerning, but we actually don't know the level of risk right now. So please don't trade a known risk like skin cancer for unknown risks that we're still examining, right? So again, sometimes tracing something to the source can reveal more information, more context about a claim than you were getting downstream from that claim. So that's the idea, right? That's the idea. Like, stop just taking that node out of the bottle in the lake and thinking that you and your own brilliant intelligence are going to be able to dissect it. Figure out whether it's the best source, right? Whether there's better information out there. And whether, if you kind of trace where the original information was from, if it provides greater context. We call this Sift. I'll give you just a link here. We use this. This is one of the mini courses that we have set up if you want to either use that yourself or use that in a class. Again, the simple idea is that we can be better at this, 30 seconds at a time, if we learn how to do this quickly. And check the stuff before we start to engage with it. Make much better decisions. And I will say, invest our civic attention in things that matter more, right? So one of the things I just want to stress to people is when you get pulled into a bunch of distracting stuff that is sort of blown out of proportion by bad sources and inflammatory stuff, it doesn't actually serve the stuff that you care about. It may seem like it. I'm sharing all this stuff. It supports my point of view. It supports my side. Initially it does, but what does it actually do? It directs your attention away from the things that are the actual problems, the things that you really could solve, right? The stuff that is not just sort of frivolous clickbait. And your attention is really your it's the thing that's most scarce. It's the thing that should be most valuable to you. So do these quick things, protect your attention from those who wish to control or warp it. I'm going to hand it over to Lorena. I'll stop my share, I guess.
Lorena, you're muted.
My frickin' dogs. I always mute so you won't hear them. I'm going to preface what I say with the note that my Twitter bio says I'm an occasional crank. So I want you to keep that in mind. Way back in 1996, I worked for an organization called Project Vote Smart. I was the director of the Reporters Resource Center. We provided information about political candidates to members of the public and worked with reporters. And I came to WSU. I was at like the 6th Foley Center event, and the topic was how to be a better consumer of political news. And at that time, as we got into the conversation, a lot of it turned into really kind of looking at what was going on in newspapers. And I wasn't really comfortable with that. So finally, somebody threw me a bone and asked me a question that I could answer about access. And I went to town on that. Yeah, let's talk about how everybody is entitled to access political information. We need to prioritize that. And that was a really important moment for me because that was the moment I decided I was going to become a librarian. But the thing is, that was 24 years ago. 24 years later, access is a really important part of what I do as a librarian, obviously, but I'm much more interested now in that part about how do you become a better consumer of political news? How do you read better? So I want to kind of talk a little bit about how you can kind of change some things now in your university career that might kind of make a difference when you leave WSU. Because the problem is that, you know, we talk about filter bubbles when we talk about information, but we live in a filter bubble when we're at WSU. You know, we take classes, we write papers, but the idea is that we do this in a scholarly way. We prioritize peer-reviewed scholarly journals. You know, I think we fetishize those because I think that now in this time that in addition to the work that we have to do to get your degree, that is important, the scholarly journals are important, that it's also a time to expose yourself to a lot of the other things that are out there that will make a difference later on when you graduate and you're in the real world. So there's a study that came out in 2016 by Project Information Literacy, and they interviewed college students who had graduated, and they said, you know, what did you not learn that you need? And they said, you know what we didn't learn? We didn't learn how to grapple with the things that happen to us all the day, like how do we choose what refrigerator to buy, or you know what, research the home that we want to put our mom in when she needs assisted living. And I didn't learn the things that I need to do better at my job. And so what I'm saying is now, while you're writing these papers, sure, you got to put in those peer-reviewed scholarly journals, but I want you to think about starting to really experience kind of reading different kinds of publications and incorporating them into your information diet. And what I'm talking about are popular magazines, you know, things that might be in a niche, you know, but also opinion journals, policy journals, all these sorts of things that aren't necessarily peer-reviewed, but provide good information. And I say this for a couple of, and this is actually, I was going to go an entirely different way, but I kind of ended up going this way. So I'm just going to go with it. But the thing is that I want you to think about kind of incorporate that information now. Talk about that in classes now. Learn how to read that information, learn how to analyze it now, so that later on, when you're in a world where peer-reviewed journals are not accessible because you've lost access because you're not affiliated with the university, and instead you need to get information on political candidates, on, you know, doing your job better, et cetera, you know of resources that you can go to that you have established trust with. And I want to be, you know, Reese talked about I always forget what it's called, the media bias charts. I hate those media bias charts so much because they're too prescriptive. You have to think about the situation that you're in and what you need. You know, sometimes we say, oh, we don't want to use biased information in a paper. Well, that makes a paper that's really kind of bland. You know, we need to read and look for bias, acknowledge that bias, incorporate that into our paper, acknowledging the bias, but also acknowledging that it provides different sorts of viewpoints. And we need to acknowledge that now. And if you do that kind of stuff now, if you expose yourself to all these different kind of sources, maybe you sign up for tables of contents alerts, or read magazines that are available through the libraries. Then when you graduate, you know, it's going to be a little bit easier to deal with information. Because it just is. I'm actually working right now on talking about reading. I'm working on a project where we're talking about reading opinion journals and reading policy journals. And the thing is, there's not a lot out there. There is so much out there about reading research journals. I just did a workshop on that, you know, for graduate students. But we don't train people how to read these other sorts of things. So I'm cobbling things together, and I'm really relying a lot on Mike's work because it's really good stuff, and I encourage you to use this. So I'm going to kind of close up because I want to give you guys some time to talk, but I'm just going to talk about a couple of things that are kind of meaningful to me that I'm going to post links to in the chat box for you. One of these is breaking news handbooks that are done by On the Media, and there's a number of them, and they are really, really good. They're good for looking at breaking news. They're looking at breaking disasters, et cetera, and I'm going to share that link with you. The second thing is kind of going off of what Mike said, you know, this idea of Sift, you know, also think about triangulating. You're looking at where information is coming from, who else is saying the same information, what kind of relationships do they have, who is something written for, who's the intended audience, who is, you know, the man behind the curtain that is kind of talking about these sorts of things. Keep up with the news, you know, identify publications now, you know, keep up with them. You don't have to read newspapers. You don't have to all the way through. you know what I do? I sign up for the little digest, the little 10 biggest news that I need. I get a little bit of information about a lot of things. If there's something, so I know, so I keep informed, so I know what's going on. And then if I want to kind of look at something further, then I can actually go read the entire article. But this way it keeps me up to date with what's going on, which lessens the likelihood that I'm going to fall for some of that fake news or misinformation or malinformation that's really out there. So I'm really asking you to commit to being informed. Commit to being informed for news, but also commit to being informed for thinking about your profession, for looking at different sources of information, and thinking now as college students about the information that you're going to need when you're no longer a college student, and how you want to be able to analyze that information to transfer all of the things that you're doing in your scholarly work, take those skills and transfer them into other sorts of information. So. All right, I wanted to leave us some time to get some Q's and A's, and I'm going to go find that link to the On the Media resource and pop it in the chat box.
Okay, we have some questions, and the first one is for Reese. It says, what is your daily news info routine? Some people go to the favorite channel first and wake up and look online. What do you do?
So I kind of have, I guess, like a multifaceted approach to how I read the news. I will say right away, I'm a subscriber to the New York Times, so I pay money to read the New York Times every week, which I know a lot of people have no interest in. But I get like breaking news updates in my email, and I also get, how Lorraine mentioned, like the 10 most important bits of news from that day or that week. I think it's David Leonhardt's The Morning newsletter that he writes, and I enjoy reading that. So the New York Times is one source that I trust for their fact reporting and for their fact reporting and news reporting. Obviously, some of their opinion pieces can skew either way, because obviously those are opinion pieces. That's not direct fact reporting. But then also, it was one thing I wanted to mention in my little spiel earlier, but I have kind of transformed my Twitter timeline to now be more news sources that I trust. So it's NPR, it's like tweets from NPR, it's tweets from The Economist, it's tweets from BBC News, it's tweets from Deutsche Welle, which is a German news source. And I think they're all exceptional fact reporting sources, and they cover a wide range of regions and perspectives. And then if I want to look for commentary or biased sources, and I recognize that bias, then I like to look to places like Vox Media. They're very entertaining, and other sources like that. You can definitely find more entertainment and commentary and analysis pieces outside of just fact reporting. So I think that's an important clarification.
Thank you, Reese. This is for Mike. How can it be determined if a media is biased or not when everyone has bias?
Yeah, so I actually, bias is not the most important thing to look for. There's a difference between bias and agenda, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everybody has bias, right? Everybody, bias is just, kind of how you tend to see the world and who you give the benefit of the doubt in a tie, if you want to look at it like that, right? How you kind of put a little bit of a thumb on the scale for something just by the benefit of you believing the things you do. You're going to have some bias. And bias does affect reporting. It's certainly, there are issues of bias, and it's one of the reasons why things like representation are important. But what's more important to the casual newsreader is agenda. Agenda is, what is the institution, what is the publication set up to do, right? So the Wall Street Journal, for example, is known as a fairly right-wing paper, right? But it also hires reporters. It has on-the-ground reporters doing real reporting, checking sources, fact checkers. It has a whole organization that's set up to try to make sure that the information is better quality than you would get from just one person blogging, right? In fact, most of their expense is spent on that, right? That's what they're set up to do, is to try to give you better quality information. So the bias in there is not as important as what they're set up to do. If you think about the Clean Food Facts example that I showed, the thing about Clean Food Facts isn't that, Richard Berman is biased. The thing is, he set up that site not to actually provide you information, but to essentially lobby for the meat industry, right? That's agenda. And the two things are different. Bias is certainly important, but the main thing you want to ask yourself is, what is the organization, what is the publication set up to do? There's a site called Daily Kos. A lot of people read Daily Kos who are liberal activists. The stated mission of Daily Kos is to elect more and better Democrats. That's their mission, right? Now, that could be a good part of your sort of activist diet if you want to read it as an activist, if you want to read it for advocacy. It's a good indication, though, that they might not be your first stop, you know, when you want news, because they have a mission that is not where information is not the primary. Vox is often seen as a liberal site, but its primary mission, right, its agenda is actually to produce a more informed news consumer. So those, even though they might have the same slant, the agenda really separates those. And that's why Wikipedia articles can be so useful, because what you're just asking is, what is it? Is this an advocacy site? Is this a news site, etc.?
Hopefully that answer to your question, Mason, that is very similar to the other one. Now, moving to our students and our community to be informed, to to be very informed, to be able to make decisions of various, as it's going to be the next president, what I wanted to be an advocate. And this takes us to fake news. And fake news, I think, in this is huge, because everyone, a lot of our students, a lot of our community doesn't even understand really good English, got in the middle. And talking about a lot of immigrants in the United States. So, like, what should I say to someone who says fake news isn't a real thing?
I think one thing to really think about is kind of coming from where they're coming from. You know, when they say fake news doesn't exist, what do they mean? You know, ask them do they read. You know, ask them about their own information diet, and I think you know, there's a lot of research now out there about fake news, and for one of the things is that fake news as a term is almost ironic. You know, it's such a misused term now that there actually is a lot more subtlety behind it. You know, just talk about fake news rather than talking about intentional misinformation or all the other types of information out there, mistaken information, etc., is I think really important. It's really easy to say fake news doesn't exist, but how do they define it? You know, what examples are they going to give? You know, these are some of the questions. Oh, I think a lot of times, you know, that we don't necessarily have to meet people in the middle, but we have to show some empathy to get a sense of where they're coming from, to actually have, you know, a real conversation about some of these things, and not just basically, you know, throwing statements at each other where, you know, where they never cross. You know, you actually want to look for dialogue.
I'll also say sometimes when people say things like CNN is fake news, the New York Times is fake news, and so forth, they're not actually talking about the individual articles. What they're actually talking about is they believe that the selection of the things that the New York Times tends to cover, or that people tend to share from the New York Times, is not actually reflecting their set of priorities in terms of what they would like to see covered, right? So, oh, you cover all these things, but you don't cover these things. One of the things to say back to them is actually they probably do cover those things. An organization like New York Times produces tons of stories, and it may be that they're only seeing the latest sort of inflammatory thing that people are hate tweeting, right? But it is quite possible that the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, you know, whatever, Chicago Tribune, actually does have reporting on issues they care about that is reported in a way that's useful to them. And so I think letting people know that, look, I'm interested in reading about the issues that you care about. And I did find this article here from Chicago Tribune, which helped form some of my thinking on this. And thank you for alerting me to this issue. But if we talk about it, let's talk about it using some stuff that's a little bit more careful with the truth, right? And so I think that's one way of going about this.
I think sometimes, you know, we talk so much about individual sorts of publications as if they're monolithic. And what we don't recognize is the systems kind of behind them. And like one of the things is, you know, librarians talk a lot about information literacy, you know, how to assess, et cetera. But, you know, those are very sort of limited ways to look at information without kind of looking at them critically, without looking at the political and social and algorithmic, technical, all those things sorts of behind all that information. So that's helpful to look at as well. You know, it's sort of like a agenda setting, you know, who is setting the agenda for the information that we're seeing? You know, those are good questions to kind of think about as well.
This question kind of relates a little bit. It says some people say that we cannot rely on science because it keeps changing. What would be good to say to someone like that?
Have you never changed your mind? Look at Dr. Fauci. I mean, we've all kind of learned a lot during the pandemic. A lot of the things that we were doing at the very start of it, we're not doing now. You know, when people talk about flip-flopping or that sort of stuff, there's no acknowledgement that people learn, you know, that we become more informed and we realize that the way we thought originally was incorrect. And that's a positive in my mind, not a negative. You know, I don't know.
I mean, I just say more generally, we could do better with science communication than we're doing. We can certainly do better. I think one of we need to find ways to talk about things where there's an emerging picture that looks fairly clear in one direction, but doesn't have certainty about it, because we can go wrong both ways, and you see this. So I thought one of the ways that Fauci did this very well recently was when he was talking about double masking. About a month ago, he started saying, we actually don't have data on it. I can tell you, though, that it kind of makes common sense, and it doesn't seem that it was just very clear that we were looking at it. We were going to have data. In the meantime, it looked like things would trend one way. And it's that sort of communication skill that we need more of. I think we saw something, the opposite of that at the beginning, where there was real confusion about who would benefit from masks and who would not benefit from masks. That seemed to be, there was some sort of like 13-dimensional chess in the background about, well, if we say that they're useful to everyone, then places will run out. And that was not a useful approach to the situation and did a lot of harm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Lorena, Mike, and Reese for being today with us. We have more than 455 people. This is amazing. Something that shows us that this conversation have to continue, that as our responsibility for, you know, to be informed, the best informed that we can, to be able to do the different choices and to make decisions. And so I want to say thank you. And on behalf of, you know, Ben and David and our program, Students Affairs and everything, thank you so much for being this afternoon with us. And hopefully we'll see you in the next opportunity.